Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's video is big. It's major even, because we're returning to the HeyGears ecosystem. Admittedly, a lot faster than I thought we would, since we last looked at the HeyGears Reflex behind me just about 6 months ago. We didn't get on the Reflex bandwagon at launch. It's actually been out since 2023, so it's within line for when they would be refreshing this machine. I just feel a little bit bad that we recommended this awesome printer, and now there's another one, so if you kind of got it based off my recommendation, I do apologize, but I had nothing to do with it. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about the Reflex 2. Now, yes, unfortunately, that is the name. They are sticking with the naming scheme, which is one of the biggest issues that I have developed since reviewing this machine, is just trying to talk about it to my audience, to people in the comments when they ask for recommendations and such. Having 3 machines named Reflex is getting really, really complicated. I really wish they had picked a different naming scheme, because now we have the Reflex, the one behind me, we have the Reflex Turbo, we have the Reflex RS, the Reflex RS Turbo, we have the Reflex 2, and then there'll be the Reflex 2 Pro. And they all have different modules. In other words, the pulse release module that I currently have stored under here. There's the PRM1, the PRM2, the PRM-RS. And it's just getting really, really silly. And to make matters even more difficult, they don't make the resins work with every single printer. You have to get, if you wanted to print, for example, Pack 10, this one, the castable, you have to have the Reflex, or the Reflex 2, or the Reflex 2 Pro. You cannot use it on the RS, and you cannot print it without having the pulse release module. So it's just becoming this big web that we have to untangle every single time. And this one will be compatible with all resins. As a matter of fact, it will be compatible with more resins because they're going to be developing new ones. There's going to be higher engineering grade materials that require extra heating. They have fiber reinforcement. They're really good for flexibility, and there's all sorts of really cool things that are coming that this machine enables you to do that the Reflex 1 couldn't. So why is that? Let's actually look and talk about the machine. The Reflex 2 will be the successor to the Reflex 1. It has a larger build volume of 230 millimeters on the X, 144 millimeters on the Y, and 230 millimeters on the Z, compared to the Reflex 1, which had 192 millimeters on the X, 121 millimeters on the Y, and 220 on the Z, which translates to approximately a 33% build volume increase overall. We have to take into account the Z in this instance. It's still quite large. We'll talk more about these in a little bit, but there is a full build plate. You can see the difference. It's about an extra inch on the Y and about a solid 1.5 inches on the X. Now you will see 2 models. I did mention there is the Reflex 2 Pro, which will be essentially the same machine. It will have the same 230X and 144Y, but it will be 350 millimeters on the Z. So it has an extra 6 inches of height, basically. It also has a slightly different light engine. We'll get to that later. Now, something that I can hear a few people through the screen thinking, you're very loud, I can hear it. This is a larger build volume printer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be physically larger as a machine. We're talking the machine itself compared to the Reflex 1. They redesigned the hood to be more like the Reflex RS in that it hinges from the center and it goes a little bit more backwards versus this one, which just kind of goes up and flips from the top of the axis. This makes it a solid 6 inches shorter when the lid is open. Now, the 2 Pro is going to be even bigger than that, so ignore the Reflex 2 Pro. That's probably going to still be taller. But the Reflex 1 is a physically shorter machine, which is amazing because on a standard shelf like so, which you can get at pretty much any hardware store, I think, there's nothing fancy about it, you could raise this level up and still have quite a lot of room to fit, I would say 4 of these, because obviously you can see I can fit 2 wide. I bet you I could do 2 layers. Whereas with this one, because I have to have so much height, it actually fills this entire space. I don't think we'd be able to get 4 Reflex 1s on one of these. I dare to dream of having a very small, granted, print farm of 4 Reflex 2s in this shop. I don't have nearly enough demand for that, but it would be so cool because I'm really enjoying the way the ecosystem is going in the sense of the entire workflow. So when I look at the importing a model into the slicer, I'm sending it to the machine, etc. It's just so fluid. It would just be so cool to have as a production unit. Now, as mentioned before, there is a greatly enhanced light engine in the Reflex 2. This is one of those major updates that it's maybe too much to call it a quantum leap, but it's extremely unique and it's extremely capable with what they call the Optazone light engine. This system on the Reflex 2, because it does differ between the Pro, has an array of 161 385 nanometer UV LEDs mounted to a control board. Each LED is segregated from its neighbor inside its own little hexagon. Each hexagon has a lens mounted above it. And the difference with this versus something like my Prusa SL1S, which I have here on the floor, sad little guy, which only has, I think, 21 LEDs with larger lenses. These are micro lenses and micro LEDs. And because HeyGears has designed this in such a way that they can control each and every light zone independently, there is massive amounts of control and a 94% light uniformity across the entire print surface. And it's smart enough that it only turns on the lights, the UV LEDs, around the zones that you actually need to expose, meaning that you limit light bleed to almost nothing because you're only exposing within your hexagon. Hexagons are about a centimeter squared on this one. I'll get to this in a second. On the Pro, it's even better. So this makes your prints extremely crisp in just the areas you need, and it eliminates excessive wear and tear across the entire screen as it's printing. So it saves on energy, it saves on heat, it saves the components itself because with a COB light source like the Reflex 1, where you're just exposing the entire screen to UV every time, you do get excessive wear because you're not going to necessarily use everything towards the edges. Now the Reflex 2 Pro, which I mentioned, is a taller on the Z. It has the slightly different Optazone engine, which is a massive 1,032 light zones. So 161 in this guy, which is a lot, up to 1,032 in the same space. Remember, it's the same XY. I don't fully understand why there's that difference, but at the same time, if you're going to buy something labeled Pro and expect a more premium product, you may as well have an additional upgrade. But 1,032 versus 161 is a massive, massive discrepancy. So it's going to be really, really cool. And when you actually turn this machine on and run through the wizard, it actually plays like a movie for you on all the zones. It's really, really unique. What this makes me wonder though, who is the Reflex 2 Pro for? I can understand the Reflex, but I can't really understand the 2 Pro because who's printing 13.5-inch models with extreme levels of precision that you require this? Who is your client? I'm really, really curious. The only one that comes to mind, and it's not even really a good example, would be like, this tall, maybe shoes or something. I see 3D printed shoes becoming a massive thing with Zellerfeld, I believe it's called, but they're printing those in TPU. It's an entirely different process. It's not resin based. I just don't understand, but it's really, really cool that we have that option. Now above that light engine, the Reflex 2 is a 6K machine, like the Reflex 1. So that has not really changed. What has changed is that the Reflex 1 was a 9.25-inch screen, and this one is 10.7. So we're adding a solid 1.5 inches. In my opinion, 6K is perfect. I have never once bought into the idea that higher res is better. 16K, 20K, whatever it's going to now, it's just marketing gimmicks. And I know that it's not actually the companies like Elgu, Anycubic, Frozen, whatever. They're not actually the ones making the push. It's actually their suppliers. They don't want to produce 4K panels or 8K. They want to keep pushing more and more, and they know they have a buyer for it, so they're kind of being swept along for the ride. So anyway, 6K is a perfect resolution in my opinion, and it's not even half the story. The Reflex 2 is sporting a brand new type of screen. I know that the HeyGears just announced the turbo screen, which is essentially, or they also call it amber screen. It's a yellow polarizer across the monochrome LCD. And this is supposed to increase contrast and help with print life. It blocks some of the harmful UV rays that break down the screen. A turbo screen is designed to last about 2,000 hours, so a typical monochrome. On the Reflex 2, they're actually already updating it to something brand new, the Turbo Pro screen, which is still amber screen technology, but now it's polymer based. They claim that the Turbo Pro screen can handle much more compression, more weight. And that actually stacks up and is a really good thing because of what we'll talk about a little bit further on in the video. The amount of forces that are pressed down from larger build plates is quite immense. I don't think we fully appreciate how much pressure. When you actually do a print, you can see the force gauge actively, which is something that I asked for in the first video. I'm so excited because I really wanted to see what was going on and not just stare at a timer. It's really boring. Now we actually have a live graph readout, and the most I've ever seen this machine handle put out pressing on the screen was about 100 pounds. I think it was 101.2 pounds of pressure. They measure it in newtons. I had to translate that into kilograms and then into pounds. But essentially, it's like my anvil sitting on top, which is 120 pounds. I just lifted that recently. It wasn't comfortable. It's a lot of pressure, and it's going to be putting a lot of forces on that Z rail. Everything is going to try to twist and torque, and they've actually come up with a solution for that too. In addition to Turbo Pro being better for the weight, it's also going to last way longer. So you thought 2,000 hours was great with monochrome? Well, guess what? Turbo Pro lasts 2.5 times longer than that. So 6,000 hours, which according to their math, I don't know which resin they were using, mind you, probably the one that has the shortest, because you know that's how it works marketing-wise. They advertise that you could be printing for 16 hours a day for an entire year, every single day, 365, on this machine before the screen craps out, which is incredible. We are starting to enter DLP territory here. I know that that's still 20,000 hours on the projectors, but this is a monumental leap forward compared to where we were, and I don't foresee this becoming a thing outside of the HeyGears ecosystem. Now, the keen-eyed, or possibly even the oblivious amongst you, have probably been watching the little B-roll clips that we've had along the bottom here, and you've noticed this little guy. This is the scraper. You'll only find the scraper in the Form 4 from Formlabs. And I actually kind of like anonymously reached out to Formlabs and called one of their resellers, and I kind of grilled the guy about it, trying to get more information, stealthfully, of course, not mentioning that I was trying to compare it to something. The Form 4 scraper, all it does is it checks for print failures. It goes across, it has some kind of detection in it where, you know, if it goes over a pancake that's stuck to the bottom, it understands what that is. It alerts the user, pauses the print, whatever. It also agitates the resin. So it does those two things, which sounds great. But Reflex does it better. The Reflex 2 comes with 2 scrapers. There's this one, the plastic, which just does as I described on the Form 4. It checks for, it agitates, it checks for print failures, etc. But there's also the aluminum one. The aluminum one looks very similar, but this one has the added function of heating the resin. So I've actually put a glove on and touched it and used a temp gun and, you know, poked and prodded because it's such a unique thing. It does do its job. The entire length gets hot. As it's printing, it zips back and forth between every single layer, heating the resin, stirring it up, checking for issues, and making it so that when you have, say, a Reflex Pro and you're trying to print 13 inches tall, maybe you've experienced this before, where the resin starts to separate out and your print fails, or you get shifting lines or a color change or something happens in your print. That is now a thing of the past with the Reflex 2. I personally wasn't sold on the idea of the scraper in the plastic form, you know, just agitating and, you know, debris catching and things. But as soon as you add the idea that it is resin temperature sensing and heating into the mix, it becomes much more compelling. On the Reflex 1, they had a heated vat, which means that it had like a fermentation band or a little heating blanky thing, whatever, baked into it. They're cast in aluminum, so it would radiate the heat from the outside in. And that is actually the better way to do it, in my opinion, compared to heating the chamber by, you know, like a little fan thing. As soon as you open this lid, all that hot air is gone, and it kind of works against convection. You're heating above and you're not getting it all the way down, and yeah. But this takes it a step further, so that it's actually in contact, constantly stirring the resin, heating it evenly, taking readings. Everything about it just makes a whole lot of sense. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about, something that we can't fully appreciate about the Reflex 2 is a major construction change that HeyGears has brought to this machine for the first time. They call it the die-cast unibody. It limits the inconsistencies of tolerances and misalignments. It's going to make this machine incredibly constrained. And it's going to help massively with what we talked about before with the LCD, withstanding that 100 pounds of force. So this machine, unlike the, say, Jupiter that we reviewed a number of years ago, this one will actually have lots of strength behind it. It will be constrained. It will be nice and tough, unlike the Jupiter, which was flimsy and couldn't even handle its own weight pushing down. Now, there are some other little changes as compared to the Reflex 1 that we'll mention. Resin bottles, for better or worse, are no longer loaded from the top. They're loaded into the back on the right side. You'll also notice that the slot to load those resins is a lot bigger because HeyGears will be releasing 2 kilogram bottles, starting with their most popular resins and eventually working towards stocking all of them in that option. There is still RFID chip tracking in each bottle. The machine will still be able to track how much resin is in it, which resin is in the machine and such, but it still doesn't lock you out. Unlike some other ecosystems, you're not limited as severely as some of the other ones. They've also done away with the magnetic resin sensor that was attached on the Reflex 1. It would just kind of stick onto the side, and then there was like pressure pad pins that it would attach to, and then it would feed the information back into the machine. I personally really liked this idea. I think they're just moving on from that concept. Having the little pins is a little bit antiquated. On the Reflex 2 Pro, sadly I don't have that. It would go right here. The Reflex 2 Pro is going to have a little pop-out ultrasonic resin depth sensor thingy-majig. The vats themselves have changed as well, as you might expect, but I do think the HeyGears accountants had some input into the hold-down mechanism, because now we have gone back to bolts. I'm not entirely sure why we've gone back to bolts versus the little flip latch mechanism. This just gave it so much more of a premium feel on the Reflex 1. Maybe there's a good reason for it. Maybe it's about forces. Maybe that was just a really expensive component. I don't know. But we've now switched to bolts, which are totally fine and they function. You'll also notice, for better or for worse, that back here where the resin bottle goes in, they have done away with that little sleuth's gate thing, the little one that went up and down. Some people, actually a lot of people, seem to have issues with it just simply not working. I personally didn't have an issue with it. I do agree that, in the grand scheme of things, it was gimmicky, it was a little silly. If there was anything that if I was an accountant, was going to cut from the Reflex 1, it would have been that, because it's so extra. Rather than the gate, the Reflex 2 just uses fluid dynamics and the appropriate height of the vat itself. So when the auto feed cap depresses and starts loading resin, when it gets up to a certain height, it stops flowing. It's a very simple mechanism. However, I did point out, and they didn't deny, but they didn't confirm either, that there's on these vats a little plunger that goes up and down into the bottle. And underneath that, there's a little cap. I'd really like to know if there was supposed to be, or maybe it's an additional add-on later on, some kind of mechanism that goes up and allows the resin to flow rather than just allowing the fluid dynamics at all. Maybe this is a pro feature only. I'm not entirely sure, but this is the way it is now, and I don't think it's a bad thing. The vats are still made of aluminum, and there are still 2 different kinds of vats. There's the regular one and the pulse release vat, which has 2 layers of FEP with holes in it, which allow for the whole pulse release mechanism to operate. Being that the heating is now taken out of these vats, I suspect, but I have not confirmed, that the vats are going to be less expensive. At least I really, really hope they are. They're not obliged to do so because this is an ecosystem. We have to get these vats, but it would be phenomenal for me to be able to buy more than 1 vat and then be able to just have, just my casting resin vat. And it would be great if they weren't $200 each. Now, speaking of the pulse release, there is a new PRM2, which specifically only works with the Reflex 2. When I was doing my testing, they said that the PRM2 was the only one that was going to work with this. But after launch, after some firmware updates and such, the PRM1, which is the one that's over here in the Reflex, will work with the Reflex 2. So if you're upgrading from this unit to this unit, you don't have to buy a second pulse release module. However, they have told me that they've made lots of improvements to the PRM2, so it's probably going to last longer if you've just run your Reflex 1 into the ground. Maybe it'd be wise to get a PRM2 just so it doesn't crap out on you. The PRM2 will be available for the additional cost of on top of the printer, and it is required to print the PAC10 or PAC10 if you're intending on using the Reflex 2 for printing jewelry. So now that we've covered the machine, I know there's a lot to go over here. Let's go over the prints and my actual experience. The major hiccup that I had when I received this machine in August, it is now October, was that it was very, very alpha software. We're talking firmware 0 point something. I am now up to firmware 1.0 something. So it's actually come a long way in a very short amount of time. The problem with this as a reviewer, as someone who makes videos and is expected to cover this, is that my experience was different than it will be in a month. So my experience felt very half-baked, so to speak. I didn't get the full benefit of the scraper, for example. When I was doing a print, I noticed it was actually shunting around a big chunk of print failure. And I was like, that's not right. It's supposed to be able to read an object 0.15 mil and catch that. It took 40 minutes of shunting it back and forth to actually send me a message on my phone. And I know this because I watched it. The other issue is that they didn't have, and they still to this day, as of October 22nd, the day of filming, right before the launch, they still don't have all of their resin profiles available for the Reflex 2. So I was not able to print with the casting resin PAC10 at all, which is a major shame because when I plugged in the Reflex 1 and I was able to print this whole bed in one shot, literally just hitting auto supports, clone into grid, hit print, slice, send to printer, by cloud, start printer immediately. It was like, wow, this is a real production machine. I was not able to have that experience with the Reflex 2. But I know, again, I know this is a software issue. I know it's going to improve. I was able to get prints out of it. This is printed in their PARP10, P-A-R-P-10, which is just a typical modeling resin, like what you would print a bust out of. Actually, it's what's hanging here in the back. This is a goldfish that we're going to take off in a little bit. But I still wanted to get this print done because it's really important for me that I have a visual to show you. Now, I don't think this is a big deal because PAC10 is a casting resin. This is a very expensive print, and it's not going to do anything other than show you what it is. The color doesn't really matter. We're not reviewing PAC10 again because that resin isn't changing, only the hardware is. And because PAC10 is a first-party resin specifically designed by this company for these machines, I'm not worried that they're going to make a resin profile. It's just a shame that I wasn't able to hit the ground running and print with it so that I could show you, this is how good it is. If you're a subscriber to Marques Brownlee and you believe, as I totally agree with, by the way, don't buy a piece of hardware for promises of what it will do later. I think this is a safe bet, just because this is all first party. If this is like an Apple Intelligence promise, for example, yeah, maybe don't trust it, but I think this is a safe enough bet. They will make a resin profile. Anyway, the point being here, I wanted to give you a visual. On the Reflex 1, we were able to print 96 rings all at once, flat, supported, in castable resin, ready to go. This is more production than I need. This is more production than most people need. This is great. On the Reflex 2, it's obviously much larger. This is 170 rings, all printed, ready to go. I think that this is excessive. I think that the Reflex 2 should be used to print trees. Because we have the scraper going back and forth, preventing the resin from settling, because we have the larger build volume, because we have the larger Z-axis, if you want it in the Pro, there is no reason for you not to use up the entirety of this space. I didn't print these trees provided from Bluecast. You can get these on the Bluecast website for free from their Google Drive. They've got these chains. It's phenomenal. Thank you so much, Bluecast. I was able to bring that, import that into Blueprint, and we were able to see about, I think it's 7 trees all at once. So that's 7 bracelets, 7 necklaces, what have you, with tons of room to go higher. And if there was any machine out there, resin and hardware combination, that I would trust to print the entire Z-axis tree for, say, a 12-inch flask, it would be the Reflex. So aside from jewelry, I did print some other things just to, see what it could do. One of the ones that they provided to me, actually, because it seems like a fun little model, and I actually asked because I was struggling to find models to print. They sent me this goldfish. I'm not actually super happy with it because of the size. The print quality is excellent, but as we've had hanging here behind me this entire video, we're going to take this one off. This is 150%. I feel like this is going to have a bit more impact. In the same resin, I also printed this Oni mask. Again, I haven't actually post-processed this yet. It still has lots of support lines. I have the teeth here. It's going to be really, really cool to see this all come together. I'm going to try to keep the transparent nature of it. 385 nanometer creates smaller polymer chains, which, unlike 405 nanometer, just enables somehow less yellowing. Anyway, I think this is a really cool model. I'm gonna fix it up just in time for Halloween. It'll be a whole little project video. Make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss out. We're gonna do like glow in the dark and UV paints. It's gonna be really sick. Coming back to some of those tooling resins that I spoke about, I printed these. This is a 2-part mold, because this is something that HeyGears really, really pushes, is perfect zero tolerance printing. And they're living up to it with the Reflex 2, as you would expect. This is a 2-part mold injecting center column sprues for when I'm doing my casting. I have run out of sprues time and time again and been like, oh, what am I gonna do? Now I have a mold where I can just inject 6 of them at a time. And I actually went so far as to generate a one for doing the 3mm sprues. It's a much larger thing. It was almost the entire Z height of the machine, and it actually printed incredibly well. I did kind of mess around with it, and I tried to, give it a sandblast. It didn't really take very well. I was just doing some experiments, but it's working awesome. So this machine will be useful for pretty much everything. With the materials that are coming out now, they're almost injection grade. Like, the part you're printing could be the finished product, not just a prototype. Again, as of the writing of this review, some of these functions are not really fully working as best they could. They will iron out the bugs. I have absolute confidence in HeyGears, and I look forward to making that video for you guys, because we have quite a number of really cool projects coming down the road. Again, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss those. If you're not somehow sold by all of the upgrades that are in the Reflex 2, there's still the Reflex 1, which is still an absolutely fabulous machine. I can't emphasize enough that I still love that machine. It's the most reliable machine I've ever had. I can just drag and drop a model, pretty much just hit, generate supports, and I know it's going to turn out. It's hard to describe how valuable that is as a business person. I also don't think that most jewelers actually require a build plate of this size. That's one big drawback, something that I haven't really been able to articulate very well. If your business only requires, say, 5 rings a week or something, you're going to use about that much of the build plate, and that'll be a bit of a waste. You can definitely get away with the Reflex 1, which has a still comparatively quite large build plate. You can still print 92 rings all at once if you want to, but at least the scale isn't so far beyond that of what you might need. And HeyGears isn't paying me to say that, by the way. I received this machine as part of their beta testing to make this review with, but all of my opinions are my own. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the Reflex 2 and my take on it as a jewel. But if you want to help support this channel, down in that store bar, we should have some digital goods and some stone setting practice rings available to you guys. Generally speaking, they're under 20 bucks or so. Little kind of healthy donations help keep this channel floating. And of course, it provides you with something for your business, like my cheat sheet, so you don't have to remember your flask ratios for mixing. You just write it up there and it's there. You don't have to think about it anymore. Or the stone setting practice, I found them incredibly useful for teaching myself how to stone set. And then I've actually taken it a step further. After I set the stones, I clip off prongs and I teach myself on my pulse arc welder how to build prongs again. So I'm like double dipping on these stone setting practice rings. So check that out and check out the HeyGears website. I will see you guys in the next video.